Atari brings the computer age home.
It was the 1980s, the dawn of digital entertainment. In every mall, every living room, and every kid's dream, one name ruled them all: Atari. They didn't just make games, they invented them. Atari was the reason kids begged for quarters, why parents bought their first TV consoles, and why Silicon Valley even existed. But within just a few years, the same company that created fun destroyed it. They went from defining the future of play to being the reason the entire video game industry collapsed. This is how the biggest entertainment empire of its time crashed harder than any game over screen. Welcome to Missed Billions Explained, where we explore the rise and ruin of the companies that built our world and lost it. If you love stories about innovation, ego, and billion-dollar mistakes, hit subscribe because this one is wild. Today we're talking about the company that turned play into business and business into chaos. This is the story of Atari. Atari was born in 1972 in a tiny Silicon Valley garage before Silicon Valley was even a thing. Two engineers, Nolan Bushnell and Ted Dabney, wanted to make technology fun. Not useful, not productive, just fun. Their first hit was simple, a game called Pong, a digital version of table tennis. A ball, two paddles, a screen. That's it. But when they put Pong in a local bar, something strange happened. The machine jammed. Not because it broke, but because it was overflowing with quarters. That night, Atari invented more than a game. They invented an industry. By the mid-70s, Atari was unstoppable. They launched the Atari 2600, a home console that let people play different games on the same machine using cartridges. This idea changed everything. For the first time, games weren't locked to one device. They were modular, collectible, and endlessly replayable. Kids begged for them. Stores sold out, and Atari made hundreds of millions of dollars. They weren't just selling entertainment, they were selling a cultural phenomenon. By 1982, Atari was the fastest growing company in US history. They were making more money than Apple, more attention than Hollywood, and more hype than any other tech brand on Earth. Their offices were pure chaos. Engineers in Hawaiian shirts, pizza boxes everywhere, parties that lasted all night. They called it Silicon Valley's Wild West. People who worked there said it felt like a rock band, not a company. Atari didn't just define gaming, they defined the startup culture itself. But success brings something dangerous: arrogance. Atari's parent company, Warner Communications, had bought them out to manage the growing empire. And suddenly, the people who built games for fun were answering to businessmen who wanted profits. The creative chaos that made Atari brilliant started turning into corporate bureaucracy. Deadlines replaced inspiration. Executives started calling the shots instead of developers, and the people who made Atari magic started leaving. One of them, a young programmer named Steve Jobs, worked there briefly before leaving to start a company called Apple. Another, David Crane, left to form Activision, the world's first third-party game studio, because Atari refused to credit its creators. The spark was fading. By 1982, Atari was making money faster than they could count it, but they were also making games faster than they could test them. Management pushed developers to release titles as quickly as possible, quantity over quality. And in 1982, that philosophy reached its breaking point. That's when Atari made E.T. the Extraterrestrial, the game that would become legendary for all the wrong reasons. After the massive success of the E.T. movie, Atari rushed to get the game out in time for Christmas. They paid $25 million for the license, an insane amount back then, and gave one programmer just 5 weeks to build it. 5 weeks to create what was supposed to be the biggest game of all time. The result? A confusing, glitchy mess that players hated. Parents returned it in droves. Stores refused to restock it. Atari had produced millions of unsold cartridges. So they did what any rational company would do. They buried them, literally, in the New Mexico desert. It sounds like an urban legend, but it's true. In 2014, the cartridges were dug up, proof of a real-life corporate graveyard. The ET debacle was just the beginning. Cheap, low-quality games flooded the market, consumers lost trust, and suddenly the entire video game industry, built almost entirely on Atari's name, collapsed. In 1983, the US gaming market dropped 97% in revenue. Stores stopped selling consoles. Developers went bankrupt overnight. Atari, once worth billions, was bleeding cash. Warner Communications panicked and sold Atari's consumer division for pennies on the dollar. The company that created fun had destroyed an entire industry. For a while, it seemed like video games were dead. Magazines declared them a fad. Investors walked away. But across the ocean, a quiet revolution was brewing in Japan. In 1985, Nintendo launched the NES, the Nintendo Entertainment System, and rebuilt gaming from scratch. They brought discipline where Atari brought chaos, quality control where Atari brought greed, vision where Atari brought ego. And within years, Nintendo became the name synonymous with gaming. Atari had lit the fire, Nintendo controlled it. So, what if Atari hadn't imploded? What if they had valued creativity over cash, quality over speed? They could have been Nintendo. They could have been Sony. They could have been gaming itself. Instead, they became a cautionary tale, a company that confused being first with being untouchable. Atari proved that you can invent an industry and still lose it. Atari's downfall wasn't about technology, it was about hubris. They believed fun was infinite, that people would keep buying anything with their logo on it. They stopped listening to players, to creators, and to reality. And when ego runs a company, even the most fun idea becomes a tragedy. Innovation is fragile. The moment you stop respecting it, it disappears, just like Atari did. Atari's story didn't just shape gaming, it shaped Silicon Valley. Every startup chasing fast growth, every company ignoring its creators, every CEO believing they're invincible is living in Atari's shadow. Because in business, just like in games, you don't lose when you fail once, you lose when you stop learning. Thanks for watching Missed Billions Explained. If you enjoyed this episode, hit like, subscribe, and tell us which billion-dollar mistake you want us to explore next. Because somewhere, right now, another company thinks they've cracked the code, and they're about to hit game over.
Did you try breakout with a Bing wall? Did you try breakout with an extra ball? It's what fun's all about. It's Super Breakout. It's a brand new game from Atari. Have you played Atari today?
If you liked Breakout, you'll love Super Breakout. It's got more color, more sound, and more action. And naturally, it's from Atari.
Have you played Atari today?